Hello, and welcome to the Focusing Way podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm your host, David Battistella. Today on the Focusing Way podcast, our guest is Barbara McGavin. Barbara specializes in using focusing with emotional overwhelm, self-criticism, and creativity. Barbara McGavin's greatest joy is exploring the frontiers of the focusing process, what it is, and how it can be applied in daily life. Since 1991, she's been developing inner relationship focusing with Ann Weiser Cornell. Since 1994, the two of them have been exploring focusing in some of the most difficult areas of life. Treasure Maps to the Soul has grown out of this and is the core of Barbara's own focusing practice. Barbara's other great interest is in how focusing can be used in the creative arts. She has developed a process called From Spark to Beacon to help people develop and release their creative capacities. Barbara has been practicing focusing since 1983. In the 1980s, she helped found the British Focusing Network and the British Focusing Teachers Association. She is a certifying coordinator for the Focusing Institute, as well as an accrediting mentor for the British Focusing Teachers Association. Her background is in humanistic psychology, teaching, fine art, and graphic design. And joining me now is Barbara McGavin. Barbara, thank you so much for being with me today.
It's a pleasure. It's great to be with you, David.
I just wanted to sort of begin at the beginning a little bit because you were there, and I was hoping if you could take me back to the beginnings and the early days of focusing as you experienced it.
Right. Well, let me see. I learned focusing at the beginning of 1983, and the little book, Jean's book with the stones on the cover, it came out a few years earlier than that. And I was living in the UK with my husband, my then husband, and he was involved in Gestalt, and he had a friend of his who came back from Canada one day and said, "You have to learn this. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. Just go and learn it. It's called focusing. It is going to change your life. It's the best thing that you will ever do. Just do it." And so we did. We went and we found the little book, and we eventually found a teacher. It was really difficult because there was nobody then, basically. So and it took me a long time. It was not the easiest thing to learn. The person who taught us wasn't a particularly good teacher.
Mm.
And so we kind of, we figured it out. And it did change our lives. It certainly changed mine. Here I am, how many years later? 30-something years later. And I'm still learning about focusing. It's still subtle. It still unfolds and opens and deepens my life. And it's part of my life.
Can you talk about in those early and first moments, in the first days, what was happening? Like, what were the experiences that were telling you that this was sort of the right thing and the right thing for you?
I'd been involved in therapy for quite a while at that point, and I was pretty discouraged and disillusioned at that point. I felt like I was going around in circles and not really getting to the core of what was important, and I didn't really feel like I really wasn't sure whether anything was changing. So I remember one session that I had, and something changed. Something actually shifted inside. I could feel that there was something that was really different. I felt like I had hit the mark and something had changed in a way that had never happened in, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of therapy that I'd been doing at that point. And there was this physical relief and release. And somehow there was like a little bit more blue sky or fresh air inside me than had ever happened before. And it was magic. And at that point I knew that I just really wanted to keep on going.
Could you talk a little bit about at what point in your focusing journey you met Anne?
That was a little while later. That was like, um, I knew about Anne, or Lee and I knew about Anne quite early on. She had, because there were so few people who were teaching or who were involved in focusing, that almost anybody who was at all involved with focusing wound up with their names in the back of one of the editions of the little focusing book. And so Lee's and my name was in the back of the book. So she wrote to us and said, would you like to be part of my editorial board? She had moved to from Chicago to California and started something called the Focusing Connection, which was a monthly newsletter. And so we said, yes, of course we will. We would love to. And we would write little things from time to time. And then one year she was coming to Europe to teach in Holland. And she had a little bit of time available. And she said, would you like to meet? And I said, sure, come on over. Let's do something. How about a bunch of focusers all get together and we'll have a little focusing weekend, a kind of a peer focusing weekend. What do you think about that? And so she said yes. And I remember picking her up at the train station in Bath, and got into the car, and we were driving down to Devon, which was where we were going to be having this workshop. And we just got on like a house on fire. We were really into the same music and the same books and the same films, and we had a lot of fun. Just, chatter all the way to Devon. 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and we never looked back.
Yeah, because you went on to sort of develop a whole kind of focusing, the type of focusing I learned, called inner relationship focusing.
Yeah.
And could you just talk a little bit about how inner relationship developed and what sort of, how you broke off and created this? I don't even like to use the term broke off because it's all kind of a whole thing or an extension of, but maybe you could just start with how it's a little bit different.
The way it developed was I was having a problem with the 6 steps as they had been developed by Jean. And the big problem for me was the first one, which is called clearing a space. And I couldn't do it the way it seemed to be, the instructions seemed to be. It wasn't working for me. So I needed to do something different. And in order to be able to do focusing, I was trying to move this thing and put it to a distance and all of that, and it just wasn't working. So I started just saying hello to and acknowledging whatever was there. And that seemed to work. That seemed to allow, I could acknowledge several things that were happening, several experiences that I was having internally, without having to do anything to them. And that kind of gave me a clue. Oh, maybe there's something about a relationship that's going on here. That was one part of how inner relationship focusing developed. The other big part was having a different kind of relationship with what's called the inner critic, or what was called the inner critic in Gendlinian focusing. And I felt there was something fundamentally off about pushing it away or dismissing it or being disrespectful towards it. That's, this is something that's happening inside of me. And so I'm basically disrespecting an aspect of who I am. And that felt all wrong. So we developed a relationship with that and then with everything else. So it kind of started with these two fundamental problems that I was having anyway. And I think Anne was to a certain extent, but and then it sort of developed out of these two problems.
That whole idea of sort of clearing a space, I could totally understand how, if that's the approach, when somebody says, "Oh, we'll just clear the space," and say, "Well, wait, there's something in this space that I need to deal
Yeah.
with." It
And there's
sounds like
something in this
that's what the
space.
experience
Yeah.
was.
There's something in this space that just simply wouldn't leave. And, I try to move it to a little distance from me, and it would just kind of glom back into my middle again. And it was like, I'm not going anywhere. So it's like, okay, I could get into this big fight, or I could just be with it where it is and have a relationship with it. And then things started to shift. They would move. So that's kind of how that developed.
How did that, combined with your focusing partnership with Anne, sort of merge into everything you ended up creating, co-creating, this whole thing? How did that sort of germinate?
Oh gosh, I'm not even sure I can answer that. Try ask it a different way.
How
Sorry.
about from the perspective of focusing partnership and what the kinds of where focusing partnership can lead you? At some point, had you become focusing partners with Anne?
At that point, it was too difficult to be actual focusing partners because she was living in California. I was in England, and we didn't have the internet. I mean, it was pre-internet. It was expensive telephone days still. So we weren't focusing partners at that point. We faxed each other long letters. That was kind of our partnership.
Wow.
And for really quite a long time. And it was only considerably later that we were able to be focusing partners on a regular basis. But I can't remember things like that. It's those kinds of little details. I lose them.
But what about the importance of that partnership for you?
My my partnership with Anne is core and fundamental. We're we're a great team, even if I say so myself. Anne is so great at being able to clearly share information and things that we've developed. And I'm really great at answering off the wall questions when they appear in our workshops and stuff. And we work together really well. I mean, we did the partnership manuals, and she would write something during California time, send it to me. I would work on it the next day during UK time, send it back to her, and that we had a really great flow. We really write well together, and it amazes me that we're really good together that way.
What about sort of seeing what inner relationship focusing has become and just its evolution and its continuing evolution.
Yeah. Um, I'm I'm blown away by how many people really feel like it meets their needs. It matches what feels right and good inside them. And it's a great privilege to be able to offer that to the world and have it taken up. And now there's really a growing body of people like yourself who are becoming interrelationship focusing teachers and practitioners and taking it out further and further.
Could we talk just a little bit about curiosity and language and how much of an impact that has had?
Anne and I are both really, I mean, Anne's a linguist. She has her PhD in linguistics. And I've always been fascinated by language, and I love playing with language. And focusing itself, part of focusing is really about sensing what language fits here. So we use focusing in the development of interrelationship focusing. We have to. It has to come from an inner resonance. So each moment has the potential for being open, being changing to fit what the direct experiencing is in that moment. So there is a whole context, a whole situation, and there is a bodily sense of that, and out of that, languaging emerges, the languaging for that. So it can never be really stuck, or I hope it's never really stuck. And there's always there has to be this freshness, this aliveness in that situation, in the languaging of that situation. Is that what you're pointing towards?
It sort of fascinates me how it's been created in such a way that it's kind of totally non-dogmatic, but structured enough to give everybody the tools they need to access the places within themselves to create this environment for sort of deep healing or construction of one's life or existence. So yeah, that's kind of exactly what I was curious about. And you guys also do sort of an advanced version that you've been developing throughout the years called treasure maps or treasure maps to the soul focusing.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening, I've done it twice, and
Yeah.
they're always profound and amazing experiences in beautiful places with
Always.
often very lovely people and surroundings and good food. And
Great food. Yes.
yeah. So, but can you just talk a bit about that work and how that's
Yeah.
evolving right now?
Treasure maps. We've got a kind of a new name for treasure maps. We're now calling it untangling, because it's to help people be able to really find their way, find a way that what is tangled up in their lives can become untangled. And it's so multi-layered. Gosh, there is a theoretical base that is the underpinning to that is actually the philosophy of Gene Gendlin, because Gene is a philosopher first and foremost, and he looks at how living forward can occur, how living forward can happen, and how it doesn't. What happens when things get stuck. And so with that underpinning and all of our focusing, we have developed a model that it's this whole set of models that helps people to really develop their capacity to be able to turn towards what is tangled up inside of them rather than trying to break through or manipulate or deny or run away from. All of those kinds of defenses that we get caught up in, we have a way of being able to turn towards. And we believe, and this is part of Jean's philosophy, we believe that each stuck place is actually a source of life and richness. And it's that very place where it's stuck, where the potential for life and energy and flow and exuberance is right there. And it's treasure maps is really where, or untangling is really where the core, the main part of my interest is these days.
You've been listening to a conversation with Barbara McGavin, a co-creator of Inner Relationship Focusing with her longtime focusing partner, Ann Weiser-Cornell. Please check back for part 2 of our conversation in our next episode. You've been listening to the Focusing Way podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. Please check out our website, thefocusingway.com.